Every day, you make hundreds of decisions that you believe are entirely your own. You choose what to buy, who to trust, when to say yes, and when to walk away. But what if these choices aren't as freely made as you imagine? What if powerful psychological triggers are shaping your decisions without your awareness? This is the eye-opening premise behind Robert Cialdini's revolutionary book, Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion. After years of immersive research, including training in sales, fundraising, and advertising, Cialdini uncovered 6 universal principles that guide human behavior. These aren't just theoretical concepts, but practical tools used by compliance professionals to get you to say yes without critically examining their requests. Understanding these principles isn't just fascinating. It's your defense against manipulation and your pathway to more conscious decision-making. The first principle, reciprocity, taps into one of our most deeply embedded social norms. When someone gives us something, we feel compelled to repay them. This rule developed across human societies because it allowed for the division of labor, sharing of resources, and creation of interdependent relationships necessary for human advancement. But this same principle can be weaponized against you. Have you ever received a free sample and then felt strangely obligated to make a purchase? Have you been given unsolicited gifts by charities, followed by requests for donations? That uncomfortable feeling pushing you toward compliance is reciprocity at work. The principle is so strong that it applies even when the initial gift is unwanted or trivial compared to what's requested in return. What makes reciprocity particularly powerful is that it often triggers an automatic response rather than a thoughtful decision. The feeling of obligation can override our normal evaluation process. Even more remarkably, reciprocity can create unequal exchanges. A small favor can create pressure to agree to a substantially larger request. The second principle, commitment and consistency, reveals why once we make a choice or take a stand, we encounter personal and interpersonal pressures to behave consistently with that position. Our society values consistency. We associate it with personal and intellectual strength, rationality, and honesty. Inconsistency, by contrast, is seen as undesirable and even a sign of mental instability. Compliance professionals leverage this by looking for or creating small initial commitments that align with larger requests they'll make later. Once you've taken a small step in a particular direction, you're more likely to comply with related requests. This explains why salespeople often seek to get you to vocalize agreement with small statements before moving to larger commitments. The most effective commitments, Cialdini discovered, are active, public, effortful, and internally motivated. When you publicly commit to a position, particularly when that commitment requires effort, you're likely to develop reasons supporting that choice and become even more committed to it over time. The third principle, social proof, explains why we determine what is correct by finding out what other people think is correct. When uncertain about how to behave in a situation, we look to others for guidance. This tendency is particularly strong in ambiguous situations and when observing people similar to ourselves. This explains the power of testimonials, peer recommendations, most popular labels, and claims that products are fastest growing or best selling. Even canned laughter on television shows, despite being widely disliked, increases audience response because it signals to viewers that humor is the appropriate reaction. The darker side of social proof appears in pluralistic ignorance, where multiple bystanders witness an emergency but fail to help because each person looks to others for cues about how to respond. Since everyone appears calm while internally questioning what to do, no one acts. This explains the tragic cases where victims suffer emergencies in public while numerous witnesses fail to intervene. The fourth principle, liking, may seem obvious. We prefer to say yes to people we like. But the factors that cause liking are often exploited in ways we don't recognize. Physical attractiveness creates a halo effect, where we automatically assign favorable traits to good-looking people. Similarity powerfully influences liking, which is why salespeople often search for or claim commonalities with potential customers. Compliments, even transparent ones, enhance liking. Contact and cooperation toward shared goals build positive feelings. And perhaps most subtly, association matters. People connected to positive things are viewed more favorably, which explains why advertisers link their products to celebrities, why weathermen are blamed for bad weather, and why eager followers try to associate themselves with successful figures. The fifth principle, authority, demonstrates our deep-seated tendency to comply with requests from figures who represent legitimate authority. This makes evolutionary sense. Hierarchical structures with recognized leadership facilitated social organization and survival. But this automatic deference to authority can be exploited through symbols rather than substance. Titles, clothing, like uniforms or business attire, and trappings of authority trigger compliance even when separated from actual expertise or legitimate authority. In Cialdini's most disturbing example, medical professionals administered potentially lethal doses of unauthorized medication based solely on instructions from an unknown doctor over the phone, demonstrating how authority symbols can override professional training and common sense. The final principle, scarcity, shows that opportunities seem more valuable when they appear less available. The possibility of loss plays a large role in human decision-making. When something becomes limited or threatened, our freedom to have it feels constrained, making the item or opportunity more desirable. This explains why limited time offers, exclusive information, and restricted access are such powerful motivators. Scarcity is particularly effective when it appears suddenly. We value what's recently become scarce more than what's been scarce all along. Competition for scarce resources further intensifies the desire. Auction frenzies and bidding wars demonstrate this principle in action. These 6 principles work because they typically represent valuable shortcuts for decision-making. In most situations, we benefit from reciprocating kindness, being consistent, following social norms, trusting those we like, respecting authority, and valuing scarce opportunities. The problem arises when these automatic responses are triggered artificially to bypass our critical thinking. Cialdini's most valuable insight isn't just identifying these principles, but providing strategies for resistance. His approach isn't about becoming immune to influence. These principles are too deeply embedded in human psychology for that. Instead, he advocates becoming a skilled recognizer who can identify when these triggers are being used inappropriately to manipulate your decisions. The red flag that should alert you is the feeling of being pressured into automatic compliance. When you notice that familiar rush to say yes without proper consideration, mentally step back and ask, is this principle being used genuinely or manipulatively? Is the request legitimate, or is someone trying to exploit your automatic responses? For reciprocity, ask whether the initial gift was truly given to benefit you or merely as a compliance tactic. For commitment, question whether your initial position still makes sense given current information. For social proof, ensure the evidence of others' behavior is authentic and relevant to your situation. For authority, look beyond symbols to actual expertise. For scarcity, evaluate the true value of what's being offered, apart from its limited availability. This awareness doesn't mean becoming paranoid or rejecting all influence attempts. Many uses of these principles are legitimate and beneficial. A doctor wearing a white coat, authority, is generally more trustworthy in medical matters. A product endorsed by similar customers, social proof, often does meet your needs. The goal is discernment, distinguishing between manipulation and genuine influence. The most powerful defense is recognizing when an influence principle is being used artificially to trigger an automatic response. Once recognized, these techniques lose much of their power. You can then make truly informed decisions based on the actual merits of the proposal rather than psychological tricks designed to bypass your critical thinking. In a world increasingly filled with sophisticated influence attempts, from marketing to politics to personal relationships, understanding these principles isn't just academic. It's essential for maintaining autonomy in your choices. By recognizing these universal triggers of influence, you transform from an unconscious reactor to a conscious decision-maker, capable of saying yes when it serves your true interests and no when it doesn't. The question isn't whether you'll be influenced. These principles are too fundamental to human psychology to avoid entirely. The real question is whether you'll be influenced blindly or with awareness. Will you continue making choices based on triggers you don't recognize? Or will you develop the ability to see the psychological forces shaping your decisions and respond accordingly? The power of choice, real, conscious choice, begins with understanding how influence works. And that understanding starts here.